Coffee, Cows, and Crops is produced by the Peace Country Beef and Forage Association and hosted by Extension Coordinator Johanna Murray. On this podcast, we discuss management practices and research results with scientists, ranchers, researchers, and farmers. We strive to share innovative information and farming practices supported by sound science and practical wisdom. So grab a cup of coffee and let's get learning. Hi everyone, thanks for tuning in to Coffee, Cows, and Crops. Today I'm chatting with Dr. Obioha Durunna from Lakeland College about a couple of research projects that he's been working on at the college. But before we get into all the fun stuff, Obi, would you like to introduce yourself and just talk a little bit about how you got started with livestock research?
Thanks so much for having me, Joanna. My name is Obioha Durunna. You can call me Obi, and I have been in livestock research, I would say, for the past 18 to 20 years. I grew up on a poultry farm, and I had my bachelor's at Federal University of Technology, Owerri in Nigeria. And my capstone project actually looked at pre-weaning litter traits in rabbits. I had my master's in quantitative genetics at the University of Manitoba and continued to do my PhD in genomics at the University of Alberta. I worked at Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada in Brandon as a research biologist, and then joined Saskatchewan Agriculture as a livestock specialist, stationed first at Weyburn and then moved on to Prince Albert. And now I'm at Lakeland College as a livestock research scientist, and also I'm an adjunct professor at the University of Saskatchewan. So that's a little about me.
Fantastic. So we're getting into the season for extended grazing and winter feeding and all of that sort of stuff. And Lakeland just wrapped up a project on swath grazing. So can you give me a bit of an overview of what you were looking for with that study?
So this was the first year of swath grazing project. It's a 3-year project. And we were really keen at strategies that will, help improve the bottom line of producers. And swath grazing was really a strategy that we found would be very important to increasing profitability of producers. And more importantly, during the winter, when crops are not usually available or other sources of feed to producers. So it was important to look at the common strategy of winter swath grazing, traditionally using cereal monoculture, and this new strategy whereby you would have had many producers are now looking at polycrops. Some call them cocktails, some call them cover crops. You could also call them forage blends. So the question there was, how do they really compare in terms of animal performance? And how much gain do animals, especially weaned calves, during the fall, how much can they gain on these polycrops or forage blends compared to traditional cereal monocultures for swath grazing?
Right, that makes sense. So there's a lot of variety when you start talking like cocktail crops or polycultures. You can do a lot of different stuff with that space. So how did you select the cocktail that you used in this study? What was in it and that sort of stuff?
Yeah, so we looked around and we've found a blend that was commercially available. So producers are already using this. And we thought it would be, the best point to start, because if it's available and producers are using it, and the only missing part of the equation might be, how much performance, how much gain animals are actually getting from them compared to traditional or conventional monoculture, cereal monoculture. So we went with that blend, and knowing that it would add some value to producers that are using it. It will also help, improve the blend if needed, especially if the manufacturers or if the marketers really thought, okay, maybe they should push it up a bit higher in terms of make it more sort of improve it in a way that it will increase body gains, especially average daily gains that will be very attractive to producers, especially during the winter.
Right. So, what sort of things are you measuring on the cattle for performance during this trial? You mentioned kind of daily gain, but are there other performance indicators you're using?
Yeah, so we measured quite a number of parameters. First of all, we weigh them every 2 weeks, and with that information, we measure the average daily gain. The other part is that we also kept a close eye on them to ensure that they were not, the health aspect of it was important as well, to see if animals were being bloated or if there were some unusual observations we would see on either system. The other part is that we installed boluses, rumen boluses, in 2 representative steers in each paddock. So we had 6 paddocks, and each paddock had about 7 calves, who were grazing an area of about 5 acres. So we installed them. It's a pH and rumen bolus because we wanted to understand the rumen dynamics between the 2 systems to see which ones might have, some more challenges, especially during the winter.
Right, that makes sense. And I don't remember if you mentioned this or not, but the thing you're comparing to was it oats that was swathed for grazing?
So we had 2 systems. One was the conventional, cereal monoculture, and we went with oats. Some producers would go with barley, but in our area, oats seem more popular. And the concern with some barley varieties having awns that might cause abscesses, led us to go with oats that wouldn't really have much challenges.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other part, the forage blend that we went with had oats in it. It had turnips. It had forage peas. It had rapeseed in there. So
that's interesting. Makes sense.
Yeah, and we assigned the steers. We used just weaned steers, about 8 or 9 months old, and they were assigned to any of the paddocks. There were 6 paddocks that received either the oats or the forage blend, and within each paddock was 5 acres in area, and then we grazed from November, first of November to the end of January.
Wow. And did you have like a setup where you could let them into certain parts at a time, like move a wire? Was that how you set up the grazing for that?
Yes. Yeah. So we use electric fencing to restrict their access to the forage. So we restricted them to about 3 to 4 day allotment, so that, for the animals in the oats, they wouldn't bloat. So it was important to restrict their access to new material, and then help also to help them clean up as much as possible.
Right, that makes sense. So one thing that people really like about swath grazing is that you can do it with these high protein, high energy crops, these grains like barley and oats. But people really like that about cocktails too. So did you see some different nutrition between the 2 over last year, or were there any significant deficiencies?
In terms of deficiencies, from the animal perspective, we didn't see any health concerns, in the steers that were assigned to either system, right? But in terms of the forage quality, we collected samples at the soft dough stage of the oats, which we used to determine the staging. Soft dough stage of the oats, and at the hard dough stage, and we also collected at the regroup. Of all those quality information, we would say that the forage blend indicated numerically better quality compared to to the old monoculture. And I would say numerical because, it's just 1 year. And with 1 year, statistically, they wouldn't be different, even though, yeah. But we were seeing, for example, the forage blend had crude protein about 31% higher protein. TDN was about 5% more for the forage blend. Uh, calcium was about 93% more in the forage blend. Phosphorus was another one, about 53% more in the blend. Potassium about 12%, and then magnesium about 38%. But in terms of any health abnormality in any of the calves that we use, we didn't notice any issues with any of the systems.
And does make sense. We talk about those broadleaves being able to accumulate calcium and phosphorus and stuff in a bit of a different way than the grains do, so that makes sense. So I know you only have 1 year data so far, but are there any recommendations based off last year's experience that you have for anybody who's starting to swath graze or who is swath grazing and looking to make some changes or any of that sort of stuff?
Yeah, you're right. It might be too early to make recommendations. But other than say that we didn't see any difference between the two systems, right? So if you're thinking of less risk, less environmental risk, maybe you might be leaning on the forage blend system, given that we didn't see any difference between the two in terms of dry matter supply from them. The other thing is that one area that we are also keen on, which we hope at the end of the study we'll be able to provide good support and recommendation to producers, is that we want to hear from some of the producers that have been doing this for some time. One of the objectives of the project is actually to run a survey that will, capture responses from producers, those that have used it in the past, those that have heard about it and didn't bother engaging, maybe it scared them away, and those that tried it once or a few times and felt like it didn't work. We want to know, why it works so well with some people are using it for the past 10, 15 years. So we want to know the motivations, what is it about winter swath grazing, that motivates such people to continue. And then for those that dropped it, or didn't bother going ahead with it, what are the deterrents? What was it you heard about, swath grazing as a whole that made it unfit for your, for your farm or for your production system? So we want to capture that, and this is a survey that we hope to run across the Western provinces. I'm partnering with Kathy Larson at the University of Saskatchewan, and so we'll hope to capture responses from beef producers in Alberta, Saskatchewan, British Columbia, and Manitoba, and be able to provide good information to producers that could bridge the gap and increase the adoption rates on this system that has such great potential to improve the profitability of beef producers.
Yeah, that makes sense. I know up here in the Peace, depending on where you are, but for a lot of people, one issue is the elk on the swaths and stuff. Like, you get wildlife into the swaths and then the cows won't eat it and there's hardly anything left. And
Well, that's good.
Yeah. So there's some discussion around that up here for sure. Another thing I wanted to talk about very briefly was when we're talking about extended grazing systems, even if you're talking bale grazing or something like that, another issue we can often run into is mineral and vitamin deficiencies, because in these extended systems, it's hard to look. You're not looking at those cows every day necessarily, And even if you are like subclinical mineral deficiencies can have a huge impact on health and performance and reproductive efficiency. So I know you were talking this spring about a project Lakeland worked on with garlic, using garlic to increase mineral intake. So can you talk a little bit about that project?
Yeah, so this was a project. We started off looking at its effect on flies, feeding garlic to repel flies in grazing cattle. Because we know that, when they're being disturbed by horn flies or stable flies, most of them will go hide in the bushes and be bunching together. And it's usually associated with what we can call distracted feeding. So they don't really, they might lose a lot of weight and not graze as well, even though you have lots of forage available. So we know that some producers feed garlic because of its perceived repellent effect, and others use that to spice the mineral intake because some of the supplements might not be that palatable. So they need ways to make it more attractive and encourage the animals to consume it. And, infusing garlic into it has been one strategy to do that. And in our research, we saw between 18 and over 50% increase in mineral supplement in confined system. And this was conducted at Lakeland College.
Nice. So another thing you mentioned when you're talking about using garlic to increase these supplement intake was that you had some older garlic versus new garlic that you used. So did you see significant differences in the effectiveness? Oh, and what form were you using this garlic in?
First of all, we used products that were available. So we used dehydrated garlic powder. And then we had another one that, they call it garlic oil. On the label, it says garlic oil premix. But garlic doesn't quite have oil just because of the steam distillation process that makes it look like, the product is oil from garlic. But in other words, garlic oil per se is more concentrated than normal dehydrated garlic powder. So we used what was available to producers, what they were using, and the levels that they were using. So we had some receiving at 2.5%, and some others receiving at 5%. And then the garlic oil-based premix, we fed at 0.3%, which was the recommended level. In terms of the differences between the old and fresh garlic, I will tell you it was by accident that we we got into that because, who checks the manufacturing date on some materials, right? So that was one thing. We thought we were receiving, fresh material. And maybe this takes us back to some of the issues with feeding garlic, whereby it's been a controversial area amongst producers in terms of whether it works or whether it doesn't work. So you have a lot of producers that will swear by it, and maybe an equal number of people that have used it, equal number of producers that have used it that will tell you that that it doesn't work. So one aspect of this project also was to try to understand, why does this same product work so well with some people and doesn't work at all with others? So when we got the first batch in 2019, when we ran it, when we fed the 2.5% garlic powder and 5% garlic powder and the 0.3% garlic oil-based premix, it was night and day compared to the control. So it was like an aha moment. This really works because over 50%, intake for the garlic powder for the animals receiving the garlic infused supplement. But then the next year, when we used another batch, another box that was delivered to us, we didn't receive or we didn't observe the same outcome. They were much lower. They weren't even better than the control. So we went back to, troubleshoot what was going on, and then what we now saw that the manufacturing date was the same as the one we had used the previous year. And that kind of explained why some producers may not really see good outcomes, what they're expecting from feeding these supplements. So what I tell producers now is, if you're buying this, please check the manufacturing date. Because if it's older than 12 months, if it's older than a year, then probably it's not going to give you the results that you expect.
Interesting. That's good to know. Yeah, so I know it has been, there was a lot of discussion about it as fly repellent. And you said you didn't really see any difference there in terms of flies?
Oh, for the flies, that was another thing. In a confined system, in a feedlot system, you have the dung paths, they're disturbed quite frequently. You wouldn't have such disturbances in the pasture. So horn flies don't quite develop well when the dung path has been disturbed. And then the other thing that we observed as well is that, and that we also saw from literature, is that the hatch rate for horn flies is much lower in grain-fed manure, like manure from animals that have been fed grain-based feed. So it was easy to say, yeah, that the circumstances surrounding the confined feeding environment, to understand the intake, to understand the performance, average daily gain, to understand the feeding behaviors associated with feeding garlic infused supplement, doesn't quite favor the what we call the insectifugal aspect, understanding the repellents that those supplements would have on flies. So I would say that aspect was inconclusive from the feedlot study, but it was just the right environment for the intake study, which gave us the differences between the control and those that received garlic powder or garlic oil infused supplements. And I should mention that in terms of measuring measuring it and understanding how to tell the differences, it was very easy for us to use ear tags on these animals. So we measured individual animal consumption. We measured individual animal intake, feed intake, and individual animal supplement intake. So the GrowSafe system, which we have at Lakeland College, helped us to differentiate, okay, how much feed each animal within the group consumed and how much each steer consumed of the supplement. So, and that also comes along with the behavior associated with the feeding, how frequent they were. But it was really easy to use the system to determine, the differences between the garlic infused and non-garlic infused.
Yeah, that makes sense. We had some of those GrowSafe bins at Olds where I went to school. Neat to see. They're a cool system. And just for my own curiosity, what was the supplement you were feeding?
So it's just normal mineral mix. It's loose mineral. And so we mixed it with garlic ourselves so that we know which level we're adding. It's something producers can access. They could go to any feed store to get garlic laced supplements, garlic laced minerals. So it's commercially available. And right now, I think over 50% of some of the beef supplements might actually have some garlic in that. So it's how popular it has become.
That's interesting. Oh, and with all this talk of minerals and supplements and stuff, going back to the Swath Grazing project, you mentioned that just in the numerical side of things with mineral content of the cocktail versus the oats, did you feed different mineral for both of those, or were you feeding kind of the same mineral, like same across the board?
Yeah, they receive the same mineral supplement. It's loose mineral. We just kept it out there, and then they just access it. But one thing that we're curious about is, which group may have consumed, more mineral, and that's something that we're hoping to look at next. But in terms of body gains, I don't know if we talked about that.
I'm not sure.
In terms of animal performance, we saw higher gains on the forage blend. But even though it's numerically more, because it's 1 year, statistically, it didn't show much differences, between the two. So for the oats were given about 1.45 pounds per day average daily gain for the entire period, between November and end of January. For the oats was 1.45 pounds, but on the forage blend, they were about 1.72 pounds per head per day. So it's still 1 year. So we're looking forward to what would happen in the next 2 years.
Yes, it's promising, but we can't make any grand assumptions yet.
Yeah, but the one takeaway from there is that you can't really go wrong by using any system. It all depends on which one fits your operation and which one fits your farm activities. So I think it's up to producers to see which one fits better for them, and they may decide to go with that.
That makes good sense to me. It's always best to make sure that the management practice is going to fit with your system.
Yeah.
All right. Is there anything we've missed or anything else you'd like to discuss?
Maybe I should have also mentioned that we measured body fat. So we measured ultrasound, rib fat, ultrasound, rump fat, and ultrasound ribeye area, and ultrasound intramuscular fat. And the numbers didn't quite show much difference between the two systems, but the steers in the forage blend system lost less fat compared to oats. So this is still another thing that we would need to confirm in future studies this year and next year.
Neat. So if people want to learn more about either of these projects or keep up with the Swath Grazing project or any of that sort of stuff, or any of the other projects you guys are working on at Lakeland, is there a website they can go find that information on, or a newsletter or any of that sort of stuff?
Yeah, so it's on the applied research page at Lakeland College, and there you will have access to the summaries of the projects we've been doing, as well as some pictures as well. We also plan to include some videos as well that anyone interested could see what's happening.
Right on. Is there any other resources or anything like that you'd like to recommend as far as swath grazing or minerals go?
Well, we plan to publish some of the outcomes. This project is it's actually a master's student's thesis, and there will be some publications coming up, and they will all be displayed on the website once they are out.
Right on. I'll put the link to to those pages down in the description of the podcast, and people can check them out. And we'll have to do another one of these sometime when you've got some more results.
Okay, yeah, that's great. Yeah, we will.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Obi. This was good.
Thank you.
Peace Country Beef and Forage Association is a research and extension group based out of Fairview, Alberta. Our mission is to help producers thrive in an agricultural system that is profitable, regenerative, and attractive to future generations. To learn more about what we do and see the results of our research trials or our archive of newsletters and fact sheets, check out our website at peacecountrybeef.ca. Want to get in touch? Have a burning question or a topic suggestion? Send us a message on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook. Thanks for listening.